I am presenting Union Gospel Press's Sunday School Lesson number 2, Sunday, December 14th, 2025. The lesson is entitled God's Glory in the Tabernacle. Lesson text comes from Exodus chapter 40, verses 1 through 11 and 34 through 38. Related scriptures are Exodus 29, 38 through 46, 1 Kings 8, 1 through 11, Hebrews 9, 1 through 14, Haggai 2, 1 through 9, Revelation 21, 22 through 27. The place is Sinai Desert. The time is 1446 BC. In the previous lesson, we read of Moses' intercession for the Israelites and his 3 requests to God: to know God, for God to dwell in the midst of his people, and to see God's glory. In our text today, we see a partial fulfillment of Moses' request. God revealed himself to Moses by instructing him regarding worship, particularly through the construction and consecration of the tabernacle. God would dwell with his people in the tabernacle, guiding them as they traveled to the promised land. When the tabernacle was completed, God filled it with his glory, which was so powerful that Moses could not enter the tabernacle. Today's aim: facts. To learn how Moses consecrated the tabernacle so the presence of God could fill it. Principle: to understand the relationship between the holiness and glory of God. Application: to worship God as he has revealed himself to us, obeying his commands out of a desire to reflect his holiness and glory. Illustrating the lesson: we may not worship in the tabernacle or temple, but God has ordained a way for us to worship him with reverent awe of his majesty and submission to his will. Right ownership of him involves obedience, which sets us apart from those who do not believe. Practical points. 1. Even the most specific, seemingly boring details of God's Old Testament instructions teach us something important about God and his plan. Exodus 40, 1 through 8. Hebrews 9, 1 through 14. 2. Like the ordinary pieces of furniture in the tabernacle, our ordinary lives have been consecrated for God's glory to indwell. Exodus 40, 9 through 11, 2 Corinthians 4, 6 through 7. 3. God's primary intention in his plan of redemption is to dwell among his people. Exodus 40, 34. 4. Not even the holiest believer can approach God apart from Christ's sacrifice and mediation, verse 35. 5. We should not make a move apart from God's guidance, verses 36 through 37. 6. We depend on God's presence to protect us during our journey as wandering exiles in this world. Exodus 40, 38, 1 Peter 1:17, golden text. Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Exodus 40:34. Today we have 3 lesson outlines. The first is setting up the tabernacle, Exodus 40, 1 through 8. The second is anointing the tabernacle, Exodus 40, 9 through 11. And the third is filling the tabernacle, Exodus 40, 34 through 38. Introduction. Soon after God revealed to Moses his plan for the tabernacle, Israel's sin with the golden calf put God's intention to dwell with his people in jeopardy. As we saw in lesson 1, Moses recognized that God's presence, not the promised land, was the only thing that made Israel different from the surrounding nations. Exodus 33:16. God responded to Moses' pleas. Based on his gracious and compassionate identity, God assured Moses that he would dwell among Israel despite their sin. The plan for the tabernacle was back on. By chapter 40, all the pieces for the tabernacle had been constructed. They just needed to be set in place. Moses arranged the finished pieces of the tabernacle according to the precise pattern God had shown him on the mountain. 25:9. Modern readers may perceive the tabernacle details as boring, but the elements of the tabernacle worked together to tell Israel a vivid story about God's holiness and their sin, which impeded them from dwelling in his presence. Setting up the tabernacle, Exodus 41. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, verse 2, On the first day of the first month shalt thou set up the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation. Verse 3, And thou shalt put therein the ark of the testimony, and cover the ark with a veil. Verse 4, And thou shalt bring in the tabernacle, and set in order the things that are to be set in order upon it. And thou shalt bring in the candlestick, and light the lamps thereof. Verse 5, And thou shalt set in the altar of gold for the incense before the ark of the testimony, and put the hanging of the door to the tabernacle. Verse 6, And thou shalt set the altar of the burnt offering before the door of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation. Verse 7, And thou shalt set the lever between the tent of the congregation and the altar, and shalt put water therein. Verse 8, And thou shalt set up the court round about, and hang up the hanging at the court gate. The tabernacle, Exodus 40:1-2. First, God commanded Moses to erect the tent that would contain all the other items. He was to do this on the first day of the first month of the Jewish year, almost exactly 1 year since the Exodus, 12:2. Even in our culture, New Year's Day counts as a time of new beginnings, and God's people had a similar experience throughout the Old Testament. The waters of the flood dried up on the first day of the first month, marking a new beginning for the whole earth. Genesis 8:12. Both the tabernacle and the temple were consecrated on the first day of the first month. Exodus 42, 2 Chronicles 29:17. Ezra began his return from the Babylonian exile on the first day of the first month. Ezra 7:9. And he also finished cleansing the land from illicit foreign marriages on the first day of the first month, 10:17. The consecration of the tabernacle then marked a new beginning in Israel's history. The inner sanctuary, Exodus 43. After Moses set up the tent, he was to set up the remaining items, starting from the innermost part of the tent and working backward. He would begin with the inner sanctuary, or most holy place, which contained the Ark of the Testimony, verse 3. It was likely called the Ark of the Testimony or Ark of the Covenant because of what it contained. God commanded Moses to place key items that served as a witness to his relationship with Israel before the testimony, 16:33-30-34. By Exodus 40, the ark had been designated as the storage place for those key items. It contained the tablets of the Ten Commandments, 25:21, which served as a witness witness to the covenant stipulations required of Israel, and it contained a jar of manna, which served as a witness to God's faithfulness to Israel in the wilderness. 16:33 through 34. Later, it would also include Aaron's budding staff, which served as a witness to God and his leaders, vindicating over Israel rebellion. Numbers 17:10. In addition to the ark's role of housing covenantal items, its covering, fitting translated as mercy seat, served as the seat from which God spoke to Israel. Exodus 25:22, 36, Numbers 7:89. Later, Old Testament books would emphasize that role, nearly equating the ark with God's presence. 1 Samuel 4:3 through 7. The cherubim on top of the mercy seat amplified that significance. The cherubim's wings overshadowed the ark, guarding it in a way that recalled the cherubim who guarded the entrance to the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve's sin had barred the way into God's presence, and God wanted to make sure Israel knew that absolute holiness was required to regain entry. Hebrews 12:4. Just in front of the ark, a curtain veil shut off the most holy place from the holy place. Its role was to keep the ark hidden. Exodus 43:21. If God's glory was to dwell atop the ark while it was in the tabernacle, people could not simply approach it whenever and however they wanted. As God had already revealed to Moses, no one could come face to face with his glory and live. 33:20 through 23. Once a year, God allowed the high priest to enter through the veil to make atonement for Israel's sins. Leviticus 16. But even then, the high priest could not go behind the veil until he had made an animal sacrifice for himself and the cloud of incense smoke had covered the ark. 6:13. No one else was allowed to go behind the veil while God's presence resided in the tabernacle. As cherubim overshadowed the ark itself, so cherubim woven into the veil symbolically guarded the way to the ark. The outer sanctuary, Exodus 44 through 5. On the other side of the veil was the outer sanctuary, or holy place, whereas only the high priest could enter the most holy place. Other priests could go into the holy place. A priest walking into the holy place from the outer court would have seen a table on his right, a lampstick on his left, and the altar of incense directly in front of him, just before the veil to the most holy place. The table held bread that was baked every Sabbath by the Kohathites priests, 1 Samuel 21:6. The bread was considered a food offering, which meant the priest could eat it, Leviticus 24:6, Deuteronomy 18:1. This accomplished a practical purpose. Since the Levitical priests did not get an inheritance of the land, the Lord provided for their daily needs by giving them food offerings as their inheritance, Joshua 13:14. But it also pointed to something more significant. A shared meal was considered a symbol of peace between two parties. For example, after Israel agreed to the Lord's covenant with them, Moses took Aaron, Aaron's sons, and 70 elders up Mount Sinai with him, where they ate a meal in God's presence. Exodus 24:9 through 11. That momentous event signaled that God was at peace with Israel. The table in the tabernacle probably functioned similarly, reminding the priests that even though they stood only a few few feet from the Lord's presence over the Ark of the Covenant, he was at peace with them through the sacrificial system he set in place. On the opposite side of the holy place stood a lampstand candlestick with 7 lamps, 3 on either side and 1 in the middle. Almond blossoms decorated each lamp, 25, 31 through 40. The purpose of the lampstand is less clear than that of the other items in the tabernacle, but a vision in Zechariah 4 gives us an important clue. In that vision, Zechariah saw a lampstand with 7 lamps, which an angel identified as the 7 eyes of the Lord watching over the earth. Verse 10. The Israelites may have recognized that symbolism of the lampstand even before Zechariah's vision. In Hebrew, the word for almond sounds like the verb to watch. In Jeremiah 1:11 through 12, God used that wordplay to assure the prophet Jeremiah that he was watching over, hastening his promises to make sure that they would happen. The lampstand's almond flower pattern then reminded the Israelites of God's ever-present watchfulness over them and over the whole world. Directly in front of the veil, the altar of incense was the closest the regular priest ever got to the most holy place. The priest burned incense on the altar every morning and evening, which may have signaled the priest's intercession for the people. See Psalms 141:2. Which links incense with prayer. The priests also used it for sin offerings for themselves. Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest sprinkled blood on the altar of incense just before entering the most holy place. Exodus 31 through 10. He then burned incense on it until the cloud of smoke from the incense covered the ark's mercy seat. Leviticus 16:13. A cloud had to cover the cloud of God's glory just before the high priest go in. Just as the veil shut off the holy place from the most holy place, so a different curtain shut off the outer court from the holy place. Only priests were allowed into the holy place. The screen on the door visibly reminded the people of Israel that they were not to enter it. The outer court, Exodus 46 through 8. We can think of the design of the tabernacle as if it were a series of concentric circles with God's presence in the middle. Only the high priest could enter the innermost circle, the most high place, and only the priest could enter the second circle, the holy place. The common people could only enter the third circle, the outer court. The nearer one got to the presence of God, the more sacred the space became. Outside the tabernacle was another altar, bigger than the altar of incense, whereas the altar of incense was the sin offerings of the priests. The altar of burnt offering was the sacrifices offered by all the people of Israel. Strategically placed between the altar of burnt offering and the entrance to the holy place, the laver or water basin provided a place for the priests to ceremonially wash their hands and feet, either right before offering a burnt offering on the altar or right before entering the tabernacle. Just as the high priest had to ritually cleanse himself through sacrifice and the burning of incense before entering the most holy place, so all the priests had to ritually cleanse themselves through the washing of their hands and feet before entering the holy place. Otherwise, they would die. 30:17 through 21. The water basin then emphasized the need for cleansing from impurity before entering into God's presence. Finally, God commanded Moses to set up the screen through which the people would enter the outer court. The stage was set. The visual story of sin's unrelenting curse and God's unapproachable holiness was ready for Israel to view. Atone, anointing the tabernacle, Exodus 49. And thou shalt take the atoning oil and anoint the tabernacle and all that is therein, and shall hallow it, and all the vessels thereof, and it shall be holy. Verse 10. And thou shalt anoint the altar of the burnt offering and all his vessels, and sanctify the altar, and it shall be an altar most holy. Verse 11. And thou shalt anoint the laver and his foot, and sanctify it. Before the priest could start serving in the tabernacle, every item in the tabernacle, along with the priests themselves, had to be anointed with oil. The purpose was to set the tabernacle apart as a holy place in which God could dwell. Many of the tabernacle's furniture pieces would have been common items outside of the tabernacle's context. The word for ark, for example, was also used to identify the box in which the Israelites transported Joseph's bones from Egypt, Genesis 50:26. The word for table simply referred to a dining table. Lampstands were likewise everyday items for the Israelites. Apart from God's grace, the tabernacle was nothing more than a tent containing ordinary household items. By commanding Moses to anoint everything in the tabernacle, however, the Lord declared that the tabernacle would be set apart for holy use. Filling the tabernacle, Exodus 40:34. Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Verse 35. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Verse 36. And when the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. Verse 37. But if the cloud were not taken up, then they journeyed not till the day that it was taken up. Verse 38. For the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and fire was on it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. God's overpowering presence, Exodus 40:34-35. After Moses did all that God commanded him, the pillar of cloud that represented God's presence, 13:21, descended and filled the tabernacle with his glory. God had fulfilled his promise to Moses that his presence would go with Israel. But in an unexpected twist, no one, not even Moses, was able to go near the tabernacle while the glory cloud rested on it. Even though God had graciously come down to the camp of Israel, something else still needed to happen for him to truly fulfill his purpose of intimately dwelling with his people. The book of Leviticus would be God's immediate answer to the problem. But for now, all Israel was left to marvel from afar at the beautiful yet terrifying glory of God's presence. God's guiding presence, Exodus 40:36-38. The cloud of God's presence not only demonstrated his unparalleled holiness, but also served as a guide for Israel. God had been leading Israel in pillars of cloud and fire since their wilderness journey began, 13:21-22. Now the tabernacle became the headquarters of that leadership. Whenever the cloud rested on the tabernacle, the Israelites were to camp in that place. As soon as the cloud lifted, Israel could pack up camp and start moving again. This arrangement ensured that Israel understood their complete dependency on the Lord. They were not to make one move without his guidance. It also ensured Israel's protection. The Sinai Desert was no easy place for an entire nation of people to survive. But despite the harsh conditions, Israel could rest in the knowledge that not a single one of their most valuable members, were whether old men, widows, or little babies, would be without God's guidance and protection. Questions. 1. What was significant about the date of the tabernacle's consecration? 2. Why was the ark called the Ark of the Testimony? 3. What was the role of the veil between the holy place and the most holy place? 4. How might the table in the holy place have given the priest confidence about God's relationship with Israel? 5. How does the vision of Zechariah 4 help us understand the significance of the lampstand in the tabernacle? 6. What truth did the water basin emphasize to Israel? 7. Why did Moses have to anoint everything in the tabernacle? 8. Who was able to approach the tabernacle after God's glory descended on it? 9. What two functions of the glory cloud do we see in Exodus 40, 34 through 38? 10. What did God's guidance in the wilderness accomplish for Israel? This concludes the Sunday school lesson for Sunday, December 14th, 2025. Thank you for listening. If you desire to do so, please click the subscribe tab. God bless.